99% of the music you hear today is tuned to 440 Hz, which is known as the standard tuning. But artists like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, and even XXXTentacion have all explored 432 Hz, and that's what I use too. But what does that even mean, and why is 432 Hz so special? Let's start with what it is.
This is a piano at 440 Hz. And this is at 432.
At the end of the video, we'll get into some full music comparing the two frequencies, but for now, let's just keep it simple. To explain what Hertz even means, we have to start with quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics tells us that every single thing in the universe, including you and me, behaves as a wave. This is called wave-particle duality. Now, all waves can be described by their frequency, and that's where Hertz comes in. Hertz is a measure of how fast a waveform is vibrating. The unit is 1 cycle per second, so a waveform vibrating at 432 Hertz is vibrating 432 times every second. A waveform at 440 is vibrating 440 times every second. Okay, so how does this relate to music? At a really simple level, a sound wave is just the vibration of air molecules. Our ears pick up these vibrations and send signals to our brain, which interprets it as music. Our brains are able to differentiate the frequency contents of what we're hearing, which then creates an emotional response. That's why some chord progressions are interpreted as happy, others as sad, others as triumphant, and the list goes on. The important thing is different frequencies in different orders create different emotional responses for listeners. Okay, so now that we have frequency defined, let's circle back to 432 Hz. When we're talking about music tuned to 432 or 440 or whatever it is, we're talking about the note A4, which if you're playing piano is the note above middle C. So in a standard 440 tuning using equal temperament, these are the notes for each frequency. If you're using 432 tuning, here's the frequencies for each note. One important thing to remember about these charts is perfect pitch in music does not exist. So if I was in 432 Hz and I played the note A4, sometimes it would be 432.5, other times it would be 431.8, but as long as we're close, our brains are not really sensitive enough to tell the difference within 1 Hz or so. So like everything else in our universe, music is not perfect, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So now that we know what 432 Hz is and what it means, let's talk a little bit about its history in music. For centuries, different cultures and regions used different tuning systems, and 432 was one of them. While there isn't any solid evidence that 432 was ever the global standard, many believe that ancient civilizations tuned their instruments to 432 because it resonated with the natural world better. In ancient civilizations, there's a ton of examples of 432 being used. The first being the Great Pyramid of Giza. Some chambers of the pyramid resonate with 432 Hz, and people believe that priests from that time used 432 in religious and ceremonial practices. Another being the singing bowls from the Tibetan monks from the 6th century AD. Testing of these bowls revealed that many of them were tuned to 432 Hz. Lastly, an ancient Greek philosopher by the name of Pythagoras also believed 432 to be sacred. He invented an instrument called the monochord and tuned it to 432 Hz, which he called the sound of spheres, referring to the relationship between the sun, the moon, and our planet. What's really amazing about all of this is it was before the invention of tuning forks, meaning these ancient civilizations were tuning by ear and feel, so they were naturally using 432 Hz without really knowing it was 432 Hz. In the late 1800s, an Italian composer by the name of Giuseppe Verdi began advocating to standardize 432 Hz around the world. Like many others, he believed it was the most natural pitch, especially for vocals.
Here's a clip comparing vocals at 440 and 432. At the end of the video, I'm going to compare some full music at the two frequencies, so make sure you stick around.
However, in the early 1900s, 440 Hz started gaining traction in the United States. There are theories that the change to 440 was primarily pushed by the Rockefellers, but there's no concrete evidence for that. What I can tell you is that in 1917, the American Federation of Music adopted 440 as the standard tuning in the United States. Shortly after, in 1936, 440 was mandated as the standard for broadcasting in Nazi Germany. 3 years later, in 1939, an international conference in London London officially recommended 440 Hz. This primarily impacted other European nations. It wasn't until 1955 that the International Organization for Standardization officially adopted 440 Hz as a global tuning standard under ISO 16. Since then, 99% of the music you've heard has been tuned to 440 Hz. Okay, so if 440 is a standard that everybody should be using, then why do artists like Bob Marley, XXXTentacion, Jimi Hendrix, and myself use 432? Well, there are beliefs in science that says the two frequencies have different effects on your body. For example, in a randomized clinical trial done by Christian Pedro, it was found that stress levels were significantly reduced when measuring cortisol levels in subjects exposed to 432 versus 440. In another double-blind randomized study done by Diletta Kalamasi, it was found that subjects exposed to 432 Hz had lower blood pressures, lower heart rates, lower respiratory rates than those subjects exposed to 440. There is even some speculation that plants grow better when exposed to 432 versus 440. Also, I said before that some people believe 432 to be the natural frequency of the world. And although the evidence is highly speculative, there are some pretty cool examples of 432 in the natural world. For example, this is the pattern of water when exposed to 440 Hz versus when it's exposed to 432. And here's a cool video showing the difference. Some other fun facts are that the sun's diameter is 864,000 miles, which is perfectly divisible by 432. There is also 86,400 seconds in a day, which is also perfectly divisible by 432. At the end of the day, I make music tuned to 432 because it feels better to me and I like it. And you should make or listen to music at whatever frequency you like. I'm a firm believer that whatever resonates with you is usually the right thing. But anyways, let's get into some music tuned to 432 Hz. I'm gonna play my song at 440 and then 432, and you can let me know if you feel a difference.
Staring out